Hi there, I'm Christopher. I am going to be talking about an article that was in last week's Economist. And the article has been really popular on their online website, and it's actually been in the top 5 most commented and most recommended list ever since, well, the past 8 days. So it's about Brazil and racism, which usually the world looks at Brazil as a model for having this way to deal with race in a way that is really admirable. They've never had organizations like the KKK, or they've never imposed any way to equal out what in some countries has been a big problem. And just a little bit of background, I was really blown away to find out that here in the United States we have a history of having slaves come over from Africa, and I was amazed to find that in Brazil, about 10 times more slaves were taken to Brazil than here to the United States. 4.9 million, or about 45% of all the slaves taken out of Africa went to Brazil, versus 400,000 that came to the United States. So now, about 51% of the country is of African descent. And you look at just, that's the majority of the country, but looking at the business landscape, the political landscape, and also the education system, it really doesn't seem to balance out. For example, there is one standout in the political system. There's a black Supreme Justice, but only one member of the president's 39-member cabinet is black, and almost there are no executives in any of the major corporations in Brazil that is of African descent. So where is this disparity coming from? Now, a lot of people are getting a little fed up about this lack of equality, and they're calling for affirmative action. And this has caused a lot of uproar. Over the past 10 years, Brazil started to see that this has become more and more popular. About 70% of the universities in the country have imposed racial quotas. Now, I told you 51% of the country was black, but only 5 years ago, only 3% of blacks between 18 and 25 were enrolled in universities, versus about 22% of whites. Now, in the last 5 years, that's gone up that's doubled, so about 6% of blacks are enrolled in universities, which is great, and partially in part because of the actions taken by these universities for these racial quotas. There's some people that talk about how these quotas are unnecessary and that it's forcing Brazilians to think about themselves in a way that isn't right. They're having to look at this rainbow and of different colors and to say, this is where I lie on this spectrum of a race that is a country that's very beautiful. And lots of people think that the affirmative action is not the right way to combat this. And I would agree with that. I did some research and found that in Brazil there's a really high correlation between people that go to private schools and then go on to university. In fact, that's the strongest indicator of enrollment in a university. But private schools in Brazil are very expensive. They're the 7th most expensive private schools in the world, and they're about $40,000 per year in American dollars. So you can see why lots of people would not be able to afford that, and historically it's been the blacks that have not been able to afford that. Only about 7% of Brazil's nicer neighborhoods are populated by blacks. And so I am not a fan of affirmative action, but I do think that Brazil could accomplish a lot towards attaining equality if they change their education system. I am a proponent of taking all that money that's being spent in the private education sector and spending that in the public arena. and even disallowing private schools. That would equalize the playing field for all people, no matter how much money their parents have. And I think that soon enough you would find that that would trickle into the universities as well, because we all know that there's no genetic difference as far as intelligence or any other factors go. And so I think that if I were to change anything, it would be Brazil's education system, and that goes for a lot of the countries in the world too. So anyway, I know that's an interesting thought, so let me know what you think.